On this episode of Work Trends, we're talking winning cultures with William Vanderbloemen. Welcome to the Work Trends podcast from Talent Culture. I'm your host, Meghan M. Biro. Every week, I interview interesting people and brands who are reimagining work. For more information, be sure to check us out at talentculture.com and join us live on Twitter every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern using the hashtag WorkTrends. Today's guest is William Vanderbloemen. William started an executive search firm in Houston that quickly started winning awards for the best place to work. That led him to research what makes other companies successful and how companies build cultures that retain employees. He put his findings in his new book, Culture Wins. Welcome to Work Trends, William.
Oh, so glad to be with you all. Appreciate you having me.
You bet. So listen, you've studied organizations whose employees love, and I'm going to use all caps if I may, coming to work. What sets those successful workplaces apart, and what do they actually have in common?
Well, I think a starting place is to say what's normal, and then what sets places apart. So you can study anything on the internet and find whatever answer you want, right? Just Google it, and you want to justify whatever you believe to be true, you can find it there. But if you study a lot on the internet and read a lot and talk to employers, you'll find it's a fairly staggering statistic. 2 out of 3 Americans hate their job. So not like, I wish I had some more PTO, or, oh gosh, thank goodness it's hump day and the weekend's coming, or, so glad it's Friday, can't stand Monday. Not that. Hate their job. 2 out of 3. And, if you look at places that are different, it's places that are where people like coming to work. And you see that in the way they do the recruiting. Most of the recruiting happens by friends inviting friends to come work at their place. 2 out of 3 Americans would say, please don't come work here. You're going to hate it. I don't know about 1 out of 3, but there is a small group of companies that are figuring out that creating a place where people want to be there can make all the difference in not just having fun at work, but profitability, setting yourself apart, having a competitive advantage. And that is going to be more important in the next 20 years than it's ever been before, because we're about to go through a seismic shift in demographics. And the people who can create an irresistible workplace will win in their business sector over those who cannot.
And William, here I thought we'd go through the first 5 minutes without bringing up millennials. I was wrong, wasn't I?
Well, everyone's trying to not bring them up, but they tend to be everywhere.
They are, literally.
Yeah. They're just, if you look at the demographics, like if you can imagine a graph that charts how many workers are available, and then what age are those workers? So like going top to bottom would be how many are available, and then left to right, how old are they? And you look at the workforce, I look at it in 3 sectors: ages 20 to 35, which most people would call the millennials; ages 35 to 55, which is the heart of the work career; and then 55 to 70, when you're sort of in your home stretch, if you will. It's a long home stretch, but baby boomers, for the most part, fall in that 55 to 70. And then there are people like me that are in between 35 and 55, and then the millennials. So what does that graph look like? Well, it looks like a really high, there are a whole lot of these workers available when you look at boomers. And then it looks like when you look at millennials, there's a really high number of millennials available. Some people would say there are more millennials in the workforce than there are baby boomers. And then you look at people my age that are in the middle, and there aren't many. And you say, well, do they just not want to come to work? No, this is birth rates. So it doesn't matter whether you're in medicine or business or law or accounting or professional services or manufacturing. There are just not as many workers available that are 35 to 55 as there are 55 to 70. So what does that mean? That means if you fast forward 10 years, that 55 to 70 becomes 65 to 80, and most of them have retired. And you've got very few people in that generation behind them. And the millennial generation that everyone wants to avoid talking about is the generation that's going to dominate the U.S. workforce, not just be a big part of it. So smart companies are starting to say, what are the things we can learn about this generation and build a workplace that matches them so we can retain them. And one of the things that we're finding out about this generation is that they they started out as the first generation that was online. Years ago, if you're my age, you remember Bill Gates had a dream of putting a computer in every home. And then it became laptops. And then it was maybe we could get online. And now everything's online. And this generation that's coming up, the millennials, are the first group to grow up online all the time. And because of that, they're used to moving around to things they want. They're used to getting things on demand. They're used to getting, and if they don't have fulfillment or sense of a place that they belong, they'll just move to the next thing. They're also a generation that fascinating question was asked of people born in all decades. What do you want to get done by the time you're 35? George Gallup did this poll, and Gallup asked of every generation that's still living, like imagine yourself at 22, what do you want to get done by the time you're 35? And nearly every decade that was born had 5 common answers. They wanted to get married, start a family, own a home, be on a career track, and have financial security. You ask the millennial generation the same question, and then which of those 5 show up? There's only one, and it's financial security. So you're dealing with a workforce of people who are prone to move from one thing to the other. They're also, by definition, probably not married, probably haven't started a family, probably don't own a home. Well, what does that mean? That means that the people they work with day in, day out are their family. And if they don't like the people they work with or the place they work, they're going to go find another family to hang out with. So the book was a design for a roadmap to an irresistible workplace. And I believe that people who will get on board with finding a way to build an irresistible workplace will capture this generation. Even if you don't keep them for 10, 15, 20 years in a job, if you can just keep them 2 years longer than your competitor, you're going to be light years ahead of them in money saved by retention, in productivity, and you'll win in your business sector.
And again, I believe all generations are alike in this way. I think we're all human beings, right? And I will say that many of the millennials that I know and hang out with are actually married. They actually settled down quite early, learned a lot of the lessons from Gen Xers and baby boomers, and are applying those. So then we hear that word financial because they're highly responsible, at least some of the people that I know in my network. Listen, a few weeks ago, I talked to Nick G here on the podcast about having fun at work. What have you learned in your career about fun? And tell me, how much does a fun workplace matter to employees right now? Is this fluffy? Is this real? I'd love to hear your point of view.
I think it's total fluff. And it's a big learning. If I could rewrite the book, I'd have one more chapter and I'd title it this. I'd say, culture does not equal fun. So should you have fun at work? Well, yeah, everyone wants to have fun all the time, but work is work. And work's where you show up to get things done. A good culture does not mean a place where you're laughing all the time and having, I had so much fun today. You know, if you ask kids when they go to school, did you have fun today? Well, maybe they did, but I never had fun in physics class. I mean, but work, I think a lot of people mistake culture and a winning culture and an irresistible workplace for a place that's fun. I know I did. I made this mistake. We won a few years back, we won top company culture for all small businesses in the Entrepreneur Magazine readership. And I heard we won and I'm like, why did we win? When I thought of top company cultures, I thought of places that had ping pong tables and foosball tables and Miss Pac-Man machines and sliding boards next to the staircases in case you wanted to do that, and just all the food you could eat and everybody laughing all the time. We had a very simple office with IKEA furniture, and we laid out 9 clear values of how we function together. We've hired around it. We've reviewed people around it. We've compensated around it. We've fired people because of it. And it's created a sense of family. Like, this is how we function. Now, is it fun when you all function the same way? Absolutely. But if fun is the target, you're going to be chasing windmills. If good culture is the target, you're going to end up having fun. Fun is a byproduct of a healthy culture, but it's not the target.
So sometimes culture is seen as a nice to have bucket for leaders. Why is culture so crucial in today's competitive talent landscape?
Yeah, again, I'd just say it comes down to how long do you want to keep your people? Now, probably you've got some listeners that are like, I got a couple employees I'd love to get rid of and I can't. but for the most part, keeping a productive person just a little bit longer is like keeping 3 or 4 normal people on staff just a little bit longer. Really productive people are really hard to find. And if you think back to that demographic chart, all these seasoned veterans of the boomers who've served so long and faithfully are retiring. And then there are not many people with 20 years of experience coming in behind them. So employers are now having to trust people with very little experience with very large jobs. When you find someone that can do that job and do it well, even with a little bit of experience, you want to do everything you can to keep them on your team. And if it's just about getting a paycheck, that will not work. And it's not just millennials. People move past the whole I need to get paid. It's I'm spending most of my waking hours here. I want to be here. I want to know how things work. And if you can create a great culture, it's not just a fun word and it's not just a word for fun. It's an environment where people feel like they belong and they're part of a family, and that makes it very hard for them to leave. And when they do leave, it makes them refer their friends to come fill their spot. And so all of a sudden you've solved recruiting, you've solved onboarding, and you've raised your profitability.
And culture so often is something we feel inside our hearts and inside our minds. So it's often hard to really describe it. It's just that feeling, I think, that employees get when they're there. Let's talk about where the rubber meets the road. Let's talk about compensation. Should compensation be tied directly to performance?
Well, absolutely. But I would say you have to define what performance is. If performance is hitting your sales number, then what do you do when you have someone who hits their sales number and is an absolute jerk? I've got a friend who writes a good bit. We've written for Forbes together, and he wrote a column for the New York Times some years back, and it went kind of viral before viral was a thing, and it's still read a lot. And it's called "What Do You Do with the Brilliant Jerk?" It's a
great
fascinating question.
I was just going to say, yep.
It's a great question. For us, the brilliant jerk doesn't get hired here because they don't fit the culture. We interview around culture. We tie performance around our cultural code. And that's not some squishy thing. And it's frankly, I might push back a little bit. It's not just what people feel. It is measurable. It is, if you take the time to walk through a process of defining what your culture is, then it can be something that's very concrete. And you can interview and say, they're a great person, they would make all the sales, but they would disrupt our culture, and culture is worth more. And then once people are on board, you can do your annual reviews. For us, we do 3 reviews a year leading up to bonus payouts at the end of the year. And at each of those reviews, checkpoints, you can say, okay, we're looking at your sales number because that's important. That's what we hired you to do. But we're also going to put in front of you a cultural scorecard, and you're going to score yourself, and we'll score you based on our 9 values. And if there's discrepancy, let's talk about it and tune it up. Because if you're not living in the family rules, it doesn't matter what your sales numbers are. So should compensation be partly tied to performance? Yes, but performance is more than just hitting your numbers. Performance is functioning within the family rules, or I would call the cultural code. And performance is then make the numbers hit the marks. So I think the idea of tying it to performance, absolutely 100%, just make sure performance is defined more holistically than a sales number.
And I will say, I think the more we start to define culture, the more we can measure culture. And I think it's absolutely possible, by the way.
You're totally right.
Don't misconstrue what I said about culture to mean that it's just those warm and fuzzies, because I realize it's so much more than that. But I will say that people like you, William, who understand the data behind all this, are rare.
I mean, there's still a lot of companies out there and leaders who don't understand their culture. I think that's a reality right now, right? Not in your world, clearly. Like, you've got that roadmap, but so many leaders out there still struggle with this, and employees too.
We totally fell into it. I mean, this is not like I sat down because I'm so smart and wrote a book. That's not it at all.
Yeah.
I'm not old enough to be a millennial's parent, and I'm not young enough to be their colleague. So I haven't had any life on life with these people. I've had to figure it out. And culture is not just about them, but when we won all these awards, I got asked to speak at things, and then asked to write on things, and eventually asked to write a book on how'd y'all do that. And I had to sit down and say, how did we do that? And we kind of reverse engineered, how did we end up where we are with these values and all the ways we embed them into our office? And we went back and looked from the ground up, this is how we did that. And then we took it a step further, because there are a lot of good books about culture out there. Google has a good one, Zappos has a good one, the Ritz-Carlton has a good one. But beyond those books, I mean, if you look at them, they're great books, but they're just stories about a particular company. We said, what would happen if we studied 100 to 150 companies that had won culture awards, interviewed their CEOs, and asked them what they'd done, and see, is there a best practice? Are there some common things that are going on? And that led us down the path of saying, the more we wrote about it, the more we believe in it. And now it's like everything I look at, it's like it's a cultural problem. Fix the culture, you'll fix the problem. So it's not like we arrived there with the answer. It's been a journey all along for us.
I love this quote from you, William. You said that the trick to culture is defining your kind of crazy. What does this mean?
Yeah, that's so funny. I wrote about culture because our company ended up with a cultural award, but our work, our business, is helping companies find their top staff. So like executive search, sort of top level recruiting, right? And now that we've, done over 1,000 successful searches, and we've done succession planning and culture studies and all this, the longer I work with companies and teams, the more I've become convinced that nearly every company is run by a team full of crazy people. And
I love it. And it's so true.
Well, ours is, starting with me, but what do they say? Putting the fun back in dysfunctional, right? But people are generally kind of broken or quirky or idiosyncratic or whatever word you want to use, whether it's positive or negative. We're all weird.
Yeah.
I've got a great friend who wrote a book called Everybody's Normal Till You Get to Know Them.
Exactly. I love that. That is so true. It really is. But that's what makes it, well, I hate to use this word with you, but that's what makes it fun.
That's right. And the trick to building a great culture is not saying, let's get all people the same age. It's certainly not people all the same gender or race. It's not people who look like us or act like us. It's people who share the same dysfunction. It's people who share the same kind of crazy. And I'll put it in a positive light. We started this process by asking all of our team, everyone on the team, the same question in a big group meeting that lasted all day. And we told stories about when we were doing our best work. And we wrote them up on the wall, like, tell me a time that was a total touchdown for us, when we did our best work. And then we asked this question, and this is a question worth remembering, I think. When we were functioning at our very best, what are we doing that's common to us as a team, but uncommon to other teams we see working? So business leaders can go ask their teams, when we are functioning at our very best, what do we do that's common to us, but uncommon to others? And I'll give you a real-time example. One thing that happened with us, I started our company on a card table with, my wife said, if you ever get a client, I'll send the invoice. And my dog was a really good listener, and that was it.
Gosh, love it.
Yeah. And as we got going, when you're bootstrapping and you're working without a net, if somebody calls and says, I'd like to talk to you about working together, you answer them quickly, right? You just jump right on it.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else going on, and I like eating. So,
exactly.
So you call people, right? Well, I was amazed early on at how I would get responses from people that said, you just got back to me right away. And when I'd ask people, why'd you hire us? Well, because you got back to us right away. And I kind of got ingrained in me. This get back to people right away is different than the rest of the world. And it is how I'm wired. So when I started hiring people, I would only hire people that were almost maniacal about getting back to people right away. And we said speed wins, or, the future belongs to the fast, or all these different little sayings. But when we went through our cultural process of naming our values, which we outline in the book, the end product was everyone said, yeah, no, that's when we win. We do that, and it's common to us. We're all that kind of crazy, but it's uncommon to others. And we named it as a value of ridiculous responsiveness. I don't want you to say, oh, William, you're so responsive. I want you to say, William, are you insane? It's the dinner hour. Why are you getting back to me? William, do you not have a life? I'm 5 time zones away and you got right back to me. You're ridiculous, William. When we're at our best, that's what we do. That's common to us, but uncommon to other teams around us. And so that means when we hire people that are ridiculously responsive, and we test them even when they don't know we're testing them. It means when
very smart.
Yeah, when we're compensating people, we look at what their response time has been. So and it gets harder as you get bigger, and you don't have not everybody's in sales, but for us, that has been one of the 9 kinds of crazy that we are. And if we interview somebody who's really, really good, but likes to wait a day or two to get back to people, they're going to drown if they come here. They're just not going to make it. So we save them the time of going crazy and not making it, and tell them on the front end, we're the crazy ones, not you. You're normal. We're weird.
Right.
You won't like us.
Well, it's smart. I mean, you're saving everybody time, and you remind me of the importance of speed in recruiting and executive search. So key. And you know what you're so keyed in on is behaviors. Behaviors will tell us so much. So interesting. Speaking of interesting, what surprised you about this research?
I think one of the things that I ran across in the research that was staggering was how much successful companies are spending on intentional culture. And that doesn't mean having a big Christmas party, although Christmas parties can be part of your culture if they're done well, if they're done intentionally. If
they're not forced, because those are the worst.
Well, they are the worst. But if they're done intentionally, if they reflect your values, it's not about the amount you spend on events. It's about the intent behind them. We could have done a fancy, big cultural event last summer, but instead we did, at the suggestion of one of the people, like an admin in our office, we did escape rooms as teams, because one of our 9 values is solution side living. When we get asked to find a staff person, most of the time we're asked to solve a problem we've never seen before, and we need people who have a high bias for figuring it out. And our internal language for that is solution side living. Instead of being on the problem side of the equation saying we can't, we want people on the solution side. They're like, it's possible. We can figure it out. And so instead of having this big party, we went to escape rooms, which, they lock you in the room and you have to figure out a way out as a team. And it was an event that was congruent with our values, particularly solution side living. People walked away saying that wasn't just playing cornhole at the bar, which might be fun. That was fun with intention, and it drove home a value.
So I love it.
Yeah.
What a great idea. And it puts everybody in a place where they need to think on the spot and they need to be creative and problem solve. That's amazing. Talk to us a little bit about how HR leaders can make a business case, because that's what we're really talking about here, for spending more on culture.
Yeah, it's such a great question and so smart to ask. And if you're an HR leader, when you ask for a meeting with the CEO, it is not like the CEO wakes up early that morning saying, today I get to meet with the HR person.
Like, I know. Looking forward to it. Yeah, exactly.
No, not really.
Been planning this all week.
No, I mean, I've been in an HR department. I get it. It's like, it's like no one really wants to go to the dentist, and usually when the HR people I've talked to, when they meet with the CEO, unless they're going over benefits or compensation, it's usually a conversation about a problem. when CEOs see the HR person coming, it's either, is this going to be a problem or is this going to cost me more money? Those are the two questions that run through a CEO's head. Is it a problem or are we paying more benefits? So if you want to do a conversation about culture with a CEO, it needs to lead with, I'm going to show you how we can save money and create fewer people problems. Like the two things the CEO is looking for. You've just gone and said, we're doing the other thing. I'm going to save money for the company and increase our profitability, and I'm going to lower the people problems. There's nothing more expensive to a business than people problems. If you can solve those, man, it goes down. So you say, well, how do you show that? Well, you talk about culture. You pick up the book. You can see examples in it of people who've spent money on culture, and by doing so, increase their retention. I talked to one tech firm, and they sell a particular kind of widget. They're in New York. They have two other competitors who sell a very similar widget. So, they're all three kind of selling the same thing, selling to the same potential customers, and selling at a very similar price. And this particular CEO said, our EBITDA, our earnings, before taxes, depreciation, amortization, our earnings are way higher than the other two. I say, why? He said, well, we're a $20 million firm and I spent $1 million last year on cultural events. So are you crazy? And we walked through what that looked like. 5% of your whole P&L goes to culture. He said, yes. And I said, well, then how are you're charging the same thing. You've got the same number of customers. You're not outselling them. You're not undercutting them. How are you more profitable? He said, well, in the tech industry, turnover is rampant. And within our particular sector of the tech industry, the churn rate among the three companies is usually about 38%. So I've got 200 employees. That means every year I'm going to have 76 people leave. Since I started spending money on culture, my churn rate has dropped to 2%. So every year, 4 people leave instead of 76. So that's 72 vacancies I don't have to deal with a year. Now, then he said to me, William, what would you charge me for 72 searches? And how much momentum do I lose if 72 people leave over the course of a year? 6 people a month leaving that I can prevent by spending money on culture. You lose momentum, and then when the new person comes along, it takes a long time to get that momentum back. And so by spending this $1 million on culture, he has retained people more. He's got more momentum in his business, and he's got fewer turnover costs, fewer hiring costs, and greater profitability. He's solved people problems. He's raised profitability, all by spending money very intentionally on culture. That's why we call the book Culture Wins. It's not just a fun word. It's not just a term for the day. It's a way to win in the coming years.
It's intentional. This is a very key takeaway of this discussion. Listen, William V., we could keep talking for hours because you are just a sage. But give us this wisdom. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself when you first started your business?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things, but if as it pertains to culture, I would have said start studying it sooner. We got really lucky. We fell into a process that we just sort of kind of felt our way in the dark and found intuitively. It happens to be fairly congruent with what other great companies are doing. But I would have gotten around some companies that are doing great work with culture, and I would have gotten around their HR people and their CEO, and I would have said, how did y'all make that work? I particularly would pay attention to what the CEO says, because what I'm told by my staff is if I wasn't bought into the culture, it wouldn't work. So if your CEO's not bought into it, it doesn't matter how excited you are. So I guess if I were going back and talking to a younger William, I would say get around people who are getting it right and find out what they're doing, both at the HR level and the CEO level, so that you can accelerate your own growth in this path of building an irresistible workplace. It's new ground. People have not had to think this way before, and the ones who think about it first and best will be the ones who win in now and the years to come.
Ask the question is what I'll leave everybody with today. Thank you, William, for being with us.
Thanks for listening to Work Trends from Talent Culture. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'd be really grateful if you took a moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes. It helps other people find our show. If you know someone who would enjoy listening, please share it with them. You can learn more about the future of work at talentculture.com.